What's good in the hood, YouTube? This is Crazy Samurai 71 here, bringing you another video. Today I'm bringing a video on Power Rangers Hyperforce, episode 14. Yeah, we're 14 episodes in, which is pretty crazy. Today I wanted to start off by talking about a few things. For starters, this is something completely unrelated to Power Rangers Hyperforce, but is related to Power Rangers in general. We just got confirmation that they are going to start casting actors for the next season of Power Rangers. So that's important for all those that are wondering, what's going on with Power Rangers. We haven't heard anything about the next season's adaptation. People have been suspecting that Uchu Sentai Q Ranger, which was the current season that just ended in Japan, will be the one that's adapted. As far as we will know, it's still unclear exactly as to what the next season will be, but we know at least that the casting will begin, which means that the show is not dead. It's going to continue next year. It's just now we know for a fact that it is going to continue, and also the fact that casting is beginning mid-March. So that's really cool to know that we have official confirmation now that, 2019 will have Power Rangers. It's just a question of will it be on Nick or will it be somewhere else? We don't know yet, but I will obviously keep you guys in the loop if you want to know, and I definitely will make sure everyone will be aware of that. So moving on to the actual episode itself, I want to start off by saying this. There was no guest star this episode, which is unfortunate because many people did want a Power Rangers SBD guest star. Of course, that does not mean that we won't get one because of the fact that the episode ended in a way where they're still in Power Rangers SBD's time period. So, in other words, they could do it. Do I expect it? Not exactly, just because of the fact that how the episode ended, because Joe was a significant character in this episode, so they may return Yoshi to do the next episode, and he may fill the extra seat that they sometimes have for their guest stars. So doesn't mean it won't happen, it just means that it's a little bit more unlikely, also because of how this episode ran. So keep that in mind. Is it out of the question? No, but I don't necessarily expect it just because of how the episode ran and because of how important Joe is, and how it seems pretty likely that he'll return in the next episode. So that's something to note. I also want to start off by saying something that was addressed towards the beginning, which is the fact that when Jen sent out the message asking for help for the Hyperforce Rangers, one of the things that was brought up was that, Joe wasn't the one that was necessarily called in. It could have been anyone, and Jen is suspected of not even knowing who Joe is or whatever. So that's something to obviously know. It wasn't like there was communication between the two of them. So that's interesting, of course. So that's all happening. I also want to get started with the actual episode by saying as well that Vesper is back, so that is good. So people were wondering about Christina V. She is healthy, she is good. She just lost her voice last episode. She just couldn't be in it, but she's all good. One thing that was addressed last episode was the whole entirety of her being sleeping. She wasn't sleeping. I mean, she was sleeping, but we don't really know exactly what sleeping was, because they never actually addressed it in this episode. So for those that are wondering what that actually meant, it's still not clear. Could it be addressed later on? Yes. It's just we don't know yet. So let's get started with the actual review. I know I have had a bunch of other things I wanted to just address with you guys just up front so that you guys were aware of things, because those things are important, especially regarding Power Rangers in 2019, because people do want to know that, and believe me, I was wondering myself what was going on there. So let's get started. So one thing, of course, is the Rangers are in the year 2025. They are in the hyperstream, in the hyperspace actually, and what happens is that Vesper does wake up. The Rangers are in the main base trying to discuss how they're going to track Joe, because that's one thing that's important. What they discuss is that they're going to actually use Marv's DNA, because his DNA is closest to Joe's, so they can use it to try to track Joe, since the DNA is fairly similar. So what they end up doing is they end up swabbing his throat so that they can get some of Marv's DNA. And what happens is that Alpha does some tests. After he does these tests, what ends up happening is that they end up using that DNA to track Joe, which unfortunately the data will be 30 minutes behind. So if, say, Joe is 30 feet away, that data, that the tracker information will show a 30 feet away, but it will be from 30 minutes ago. So in other words, he might have traveled an entire mile plus within that time since then. And when it comes to being caught up to the current time, that will then be the past time. his position may have changed a lot more. So that's something to obviously take into consideration. One other thing that I wanted to mention up front that was kind of brought up here, and it was kind of a silly moment because they were discussing different ideas. One of them was about tracking Joe was the idea of praying, and like every single one of the characters. So Malika, Jack, Jack, Marv, Chloe, Vesper, Eddie, all of the actors wear glasses, and also even Malika, who's the DM the GM for the show, wears glasses. So it was a funny moment where like the 5 Rangers were all wearing glasses and trying to pray, and it was really silly, but I loved it because I actually didn't realize that like all 5 of them wore glasses, because I didn't realize that Christina V wears glasses. So like, yeah, all 5 of them wear glasses, which is interesting, and it's just something to note. But of course, certain ones wear them on a regular basis, like obviously Eddie does, but everyone else does not. But I just wanted to bring that up just up front, and Peter as well. I forgot to mention Peter. So moving on, Peter, who plays Marv. So anyway. What does end up happening as well is that they end up going down to Earth, and what they end up doing down there is they end up going to the city of New Tech City. They also even discuss using MMPRtoys DNA, which they couldn't even find on the ship, so just keep it in mind. It's another detail. It's a small detail, but it's something that they even consider doing because maybe they would have a better way of tracking Joe, but it doesn't work out. There is no data that they could find. So the Rangers head down, and one of the things that they even discuss before they head down is the idea of like how they're going to blend in, because again, there's the A squad, there's the B squad. They learn about the A squad and the B squad, and what they decide to do is that they're going to disguise themselves as SBD officers, and they're going to call themselves the H squad, H as in Hyperforce. So they end up dressing up in a certain way, and saying that they're from, Marv's home planet, because on Marv's home planet, apparently there were SPD officers. Well, at least that's what they say. It's sort of weird because at first they say like, oh yeah, there actually were, and then they say that they're making up a joke. So it's sort of a little bit unusual that they kind of joke around and then they say that it is the case. I don't know. But anyway, what they end up doing is they go down to Earth, they travel through the area, and they head towards a building in the general area where they end up seeing the vital signs of Joe, who is around there. They end up heading into this building where they try to act cool and calm and not to stand out much. They head into an elevator and they enter into a penthouse area where there's a security breach. As they enter into the penthouse area, the place has been ransacked and something has been stolen. They find a man who's named Adonis Washington, and who is just about to be married to a woman who we end up learning later is actually related to Eddie. And yes, apparently we learned later. We learned during the fireside chat that they're going to try to make an effort on a regular basis to add some ancestor of Eddie's into multiple episodes. So watch out for those, of course. So what does end up happening is that they end up discussing things with this guy who is running this, who has a lot of illegal stuff on him. So he's not a good guy. He's very rich, but his money is not good money. It's, filthy money that he stole most likely, and he's not so good. So eventually what does end up happening is that there are some SPD officers that are real officers that appear, and they actually question the Rangers and also question Adonis. So that is all mentioned. They even mentioned the connection to the police to Adonis before the SPD's officers appear, and Adonis is freaked out, which basically tells you that he's a lying cheat and they can't trust him. But all this is happening. One of the things that the whoever it is stole was this proton accelerator. That's the thing that Adonis had, and it's really important. And the thing is that I also wanted to address the idea that the figure that stole it seemed invisible. He passed by, he went very quickly, he looked, it was so quick and you couldn't see him at all, and it's pretty much assumed that it was Joe because he was invisible. So all this is brought up. Obviously, there's something to worry about because people were wondering, like, what's going to happen here? You know, Joe seems like a criminal or something like that. He's stealing this technology that he shouldn't be stealing. And so what does end up happening eventually is that one of the officers is from the D Squad. Her name is Lena Song, and she's Detective Song. And what happens is that she ends up bringing in the Rangers. They have a mission which is connected to this because the officer that is supposedly causing all this trouble is Joe, and so they have to be careful with what they express, but at the same time, you know, they want to work with Space Patrol Delta because maybe their technology can help out with the Hyperforce mission and tracking down Joe and figuring out different things. So all this is brought up. It's pretty interesting to see. Eventually, they end up going with Luna back to leading into the car, and they end up beginning to track down their, you know, ally or whoever he is as far as Joe goes, and Lena agrees to help out. So what they end up doing is they end up tracking him down to a warehouse, and this warehouse is called Oak's Home Furniture. The thing is that furniture buildings and stuff like that had gone out of business due to the fact that people hadn't been buying expensive furniture anymore and had been just taking things from their family in past generations. So in other words, people weren't buying new things, they were just getting hand-me-downs of furniture and other things like that. So what they end up doing is that the Rangers head down to this furniture warehouse, and when they get there, there's some figure that's using binoculars to actually look out the window, and he spots the Rangers. Then at that point, the Rangers know that something's going on, and what happens is that everyone, including Miss Song, or Detective Song, goes out. She is told by the Rangers to go check for civilians while they morph, because the thing is that they have to be careful that they don't, you know, cause too much attention, and so they end up, you know, telling her to do that, which is good. It's a good cover-up situation. And at that point, what happens is that the Rangers end up being faced by this villain for the episode called Captain Pegs, who is a pirate mannequin figure that is pretty interesting. He is a mutant, and that's one thing that's really important here. The big idea for this episode is that there are mutant uprisings occurring around the area, and it's become a very significant thing, and so they're thinking that everything that's been caused by the accelerated drama and everything else that's been happening lately has to do with whoever this mysterious figure is or whatever group he's connected to. And so that's all, you know, all these points are, you know, linked to this scenario of what they're trying to stop and what they need to help out with. And, you know, the Rangers are coming in there blind, and they're learning all this information on the spot. So keep that in mind. You know, it's not like they knew any of this until now. So it's really interesting to see this scenario unfolding and then learning more and more information. So eventually they end up fighting Captain Pegs, where they end up morphing. When they morph, they end up doing all sorts of attacks. They notice that there's a patch on the monster, Captain Pegs, and they have to deal with, you know, pulling at it. Now, one thing they also have to deal with is a bird. This bird is, you know, he's a pirate, so he has a bird on him, and the bird attacks Vesper eventually. The Rangers do morph, and Chloe uses her battleizer mode, which is cool. I like the fact that they went that route. What we also ended up seeing in this episode, following this, is that they end up shooting the spot where the patch is. The monster grows big, but they initially don't use their Zords. Also, the bird grows big, which they do manage to get rid of the bird, which is cool, and they do it because they actually use the Hyper Vortex blasters, which is the weapon that they gained in the previous episode, which is the combination of their 5 individual weapons. So they destroy the bird pretty quickly once it gets big. But then they have to deal with Captain Pegs, who causes a lot of trouble. He does some pretty major attacks, and They do a whole bunch of different onslaughts. There's also a number of team attacks. One with Jack and Eddie, which was cool, where Eddie manages to slash towards the patch, and then he lands on the shoulder of where the patch is, and then he goes in to slash it with his Oceanus blade, and then it splurts water, and then they defeat Captain Pegs. Now, of course, there's a bunch of other stuff that happens in there, different fighting moments, and it's a cool scene, like, this whole fight, but it's a big moment, all these different fight sequences. And I'm not going to go into everything, but you get the point. It's a long, drawn-out fight that lasts quite some time, and eventually they are reunited with Detective Songs, who ends up seeing the Rangers morphed, and she realizes, wait, you guys have morphing abilities, so that says something about what level you are as far as ranking goes, because she can't even morph. So she actually brings the Rangers into the Space Patrol Delta base, and what happens is that they are met by Commander Kruger, or Doggy Kruger, which is cool. And the person who actually plays Commander Kruger in this is Zach, one of the guys that tends to work out in the show and helps out with running it. So that's cool to see him. He also played Santa in the Christmas episode, so of course they're just staying with that, and they weren't going to get John Toohey, who actually played Doggy Kruger, but that would have been cool if they actually could have, but it wouldn't have happened. I know it wouldn't have, because voice actors a little harder and usually not as easy to get typically, but I appreciate that they got Zach, and he portrayed the role fairly well. He's always very serious with these different roles, especially with the Santa role. It was just a little too serious, but this time it worked fairly well. I actually didn't mind it as much. But of course they had to, explain their situation without giving away too much information, making sure that the time didn't change, that certain events would occur, and making sure that other events would occur. And eventually, there's lots of puns and jokes related to dogs that are brought up, which is interesting. And they decide that they are going to work together, but the A Squad is in space and the B Squad is training. So, in other words, they can't get any help from them. But instead, they still have Detective Song. So Doggy Kruger tells Detective Song to go with them to where they need to find whoever this officer, that they're not sure if he's rogue, if he's good, what's happening with him, why is he, causing all this trouble, or why is he showing up in these locations where this figure is. And I forgot to also mention earlier, when it came to the warehouse district, that's where Joe was supposed to be, supposedly, when he moved, but then it got moved to another location, which they end up, after they discuss things with Commander Kruger and Detective Song, they end up going into the garage area of Space Patrol Delta, where they end up getting new clothing to fit in with the people that are in the area, because where they're going to is this special warehouse district, and they have to make sure that they can blend in with like the teenagers and the humans, and they try to be cautious of their current situation. So everyone pretty much chooses clothing of that time, except for Chloe, who decides at first to put stuff over her battleizer uniform, which she has like all sorts of stuff going on, so they kind of have to really cover her up, because otherwise she'll really stand out, and she pretty much does. But what they do end up doing at one point is that at first she keeps her helmet on, but later on they actually do remove it, so she's not she's not standing out too much, especially with the clothing on top of her. Eventually they are brought over to the warehouse district, where there are people there that are very poor, are not in good shape, and the situation isn't good. It's a very rough and terrible situation. They end up traveling towards a building where they end up meeting these people that are playing a game, guarding this building, and Jack ends up trying to get in for a game which will get them some money, and he says that if I win this game, we'll give you a certain cut of the money, and then the guy says, all right, I'll let you in, and then Jack comes back out and calls for his friends, and they say, all right, we'll let you in as well. So that's when they enter the place, and it's a party scene. There's classic arcades, there's skaters, there's all sorts of like retro stuff, and they even mentioned it. It was so obvious what they were trying to do, because they were trying to rip the scene from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the original movie, with the whole scene of like the ghetto kids that were causing trouble and stealing things, and they had so many different things that they did in that were just referencing that whole entire major scene with the kids playing video games and doing drugs and all sorts of terrible stuff. But I love that they kind of referenced it just because it was an interesting idea to go for. And it was really obvious. Like if you've seen that scene, you know exactly what they were going for, and it was just like, wait, this is too obvious. And even Andre, who plays Eddie, like he was even catching on to what was going on like really quickly. And I'm just thinking to myself like, yeah, no, and like as soon as he recognized it, like I totally recognized it as well, because it was just like, yeah, they're totally doing a Turtles movie right there. Which is, I like it. It was interesting. Definitely a different approach. So what does end up happening is that the Rangers do end up splitting up between each other so that they don't cause too much attention. And they're also trying to find this elevator location where they think Joe is. Because, not this elevator. Well, a building that's in the same... Well, a location that's in the building that they're trying to get to. And the thing is that they have to blend in, not cause too much attention. At first, what actually happens is that Jack gets into some sort of skirmish in a way with this guy who's playing basketball, where they end up doing like some dunking on the hoops and everything. And at first, the guy like throws a ball at Jack, he gets hurt, and then the guy throws it again, and then Jack catches it, and then Jack throws it at the guy, tries to hit him in the face, but the guy catches it as well. And then Jack breaks the hoop and actually just grabs the ball from the guy and tosses it in, and then tries to reset it, which it dangles. I mean, my God, it was a crazy moment where everyone was just like, are you serious? This is ridiculous. What also does end up happening is that we end up seeing in the meantime that Vesper and Eddie are together, and they're called by some guy that tells him, yo, Johnny, come over here. And the guy ends up saying, is that your girl? And what happens is that she says her, Vesper says her name is V-Dog, and Eddie's called Johnny because he looks like Johnny of that time, who was probably his ancestor or whatever. It's interesting. And apparently this group that's there is trying to create some sort of absorption. We're not really sure what that really means, but it's something to note. There's also this enemy that I kind of forgot to address, and it's important. The enemy is called Napoleon Wretch, and he is kind of their ringleader for this group. So what does eventually happen is that the Rangers and everyone that's in the area is called into a location where there's 3 floors, and everyone's watching and hearing a speech from Napoleon Wretch, who's this really short guy who's trying to say that like they'll be able to reclaim their homes and get back what they need, and all sorts of things like that occur. It's really, really serious moment, and it's something that's, again, mirroring the Turtles movie a lot because of that scene from that movie. If you've seen the original movie, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's pretty obvious. What does end up happening also in this episode from here is that eventually Napoleon Rich calls out one of the people who will act as his bodyguard because he's helped so much, and that is Joe Shee, but he's referred to as Maxwell. So obviously it seems like more likely than not Joe is undercover. Now we don't know the exact details of why he's undercover, what is his mission, why is he doing this, why is he creating trouble or whatever, but we know that he's involved somehow. I'd love to know more. I also love to know, what led to this mission in the first place, and, how quickly will he switch back to siding with the Rangers? Will it be the quickest thing ever, or will the Rangers expose his identity? We don't know yet. We don't know if they're going to expose his identity. But what we do know is that at the end of the episode, they basically leave us with that question: what is going to happen now? We don't know everything, and the episode basically ends there. I'd love to know your opinions. I personally thought this episode was really good. Personally, overall, I thought that Jack was great. I thought Pauly Schreier, who plays Jack, did such a good job this episode. He had so much fun. He was really funny. I mean, also Jack is my favorite character from this show. And I thought Eddie was really good as well. Andre Meadows, I thought he did a really good job. But, everyone does a different thing. I thought, those two were really good. I also thought Christina V did a really good job this episode. Marv and Chloe did okay. And Christina V, she plays Vesper, by the way. So, keep that in mind. Don't get me wrong. The other two were good. It's just that I think, especially Chloe, she seemed a little bit out of it a lot of times. But Marv did okay. I just don't think that he was as memorable this episode. Like previous episodes, he's actually been pretty memorable. This one, not as much so. But that doesn't mean that he was bad. I actually did enjoy a lot of things that he did this episode. There were some really funny moments and some really fun moments in this episode with him, and all these Rangers do a great job. Again, I thought that the fire side chat was also a really good time this episode. So if you have time to watch that, it's definitely worth it. It was a really good experience this episode regarding the fireside chat. We got to hear different things that are important. Some things regarding Paramorphicon, that they are considering it, but they have to work things out still. And I really would love to see them there, because that would be a cool thing. I know that some of the actors will definitely appear, but I don't know about all of them. I know for a fact that Peter will, Paulie will, and Andre will. I don't know about Malika, Vesper, or Chloe. Those three, it's still a mystery, but the other three, expect them to pretty much happen regardless. The only one that I'm a little bit uncertain about of those three is probably Paul Schreier, just because of the fact that he has a busier schedule usually, and I don't know what his schedule looks like by then. So it's still up in the air, and again, nothing has been set in stone. So I mean, obviously all these things could change, and you never want to say anything for sure until we see it. But all that's good. I also wanted to readdress the point that I mentioned earlier regarding Power Rangers 2019. Power Rangers 2019, again, I wanted to say, is getting casting. Casting will start up in March, so that's really important, because what that basically means is that, again, Power Rangers is going to continue into 2019 and most likely 2020 at least. Hopefully it goes on much further than that. We just don't know where it will be, what the next season is going to be called. We don't know for a fact what will be adapted, but we are assuming that it will be Ultra Sentai Q Ranger, which just ended. I'd love to know, of course, as well. The latest I'm expecting, I really hope it doesn't take this long, would be May that we would know, just because that's when the licensing expo occurs. So keep that in mind. If you're wondering when the latest it would be that we would actually know the name of the next season, it would be then. Hopefully we'll know this month. That could actually happen, and I think that would be great to know, just so that we can say for a fact that we know what the season's going to be called, and maybe even know the synopsis for the next season, and also where the show will be. We don't even know if it will be on Nickelodeon next year. It might not. So, I love to hear your opinions. Did you guys enjoy this episode? I personally did a lot. I thought it was a fun time. I'll have several questions for you guys. I don't want to address them all here right now. Some of them I've already kind of addressed, but please remember to like, comment, subscribe. I know this video was long again, but these videos are just long because there's a lot of things going on, and sometimes I just don't even know what I'm saying because there's so much to say, and sometimes I'm trying to catch up with information when I watch these episodes, so it's sort of like, how do I organize this in some cases? But it was a really good time. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next video. So until then, guys, I'm Crazy Samurai 71, and goodbye, guys.